Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. I'm Stephen Brown and joining me is Jason Baka. And this is our second episode of the Leeds United Debate Show, where we take a look at certain issues at Leeds United, whether it be focusing on one player or one event, or those sliding door moments of what could have been for the club. Today we're focusing on the 2002 Leeds United team, which had sailed the heights of the Champions League semi-final a few months before and added big names such as Robbie Fowler to its ranks. The team had reached the top of the league by the end of the 2001 calendar. However, it proved to be the last hurrah as the team slumped and the club imploded. So we're asking the question, just how good were this team? Did they underachieve? Did they overachieve? And what became of the managers and the players, and the manager involved? Please do give a like on the video. And if you're watching live, get involved in the debate by getting your comments in. Or if you're watching this later, please do let us know what you think. Jason, the 2001-2002 Leeds United team, it's a fascinating period, one of the most notorious periods from Leeds United's entire history, I think. O'Leary took over as manager in 1998, succeeding George Graham. He was Graham's assistant, and then he got the gig after, a brilliant spell as caretaker manager. We had some massive highs during that period. 99-2000, we finished third. We qualified for the Champions League. First time of asking in the Champions League, we make the semi-finals, which blows your mind when you actually think about what that team actually did. That is
incredible. Double groups back then as well, Brownie.
Double
groups.
Yeah,
remember painful. That.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to get through it is absolutely. I mean, how many games would that be across that tournament? It must have been absolutely mega. But alas, it didn't quite work out in the end. The season after, we didn't qualify for the Champions League. And then we know what happened. The rest is history, as they say, and that the club went into a big decline, which lasted for about 16 years. Yippee. But we're focusing on the 2001-2002 team in particular, because that was kind of the last hurrah, as we mentioned, for that side. It was where we got all our signings in the door. The squad was pumped. And really, things should have gone from strength to strength. However, it didn't quite materialise. We're going to go through each of the players in the squad from that season as well. We're going to give you our reviews and ratings of each of the players. We're going to discuss what happened to these guys after and ask the question that, did we underachieve? Should they have won a tournament? Or actually, was the whole picture better than the sum of its parts? So we're gonna get to it. But yeah, please get your comments in, join along. We'll get to your comments. Do smash a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But Jason, I mean, let's rewind. So we're rewinding 21 years ago now.
Jeez.
I know, scary stuff. That team, that O'Leary team, I think you mentioned before we started you were about 11, 12 at the time. Yeah. So it must have really captured your imagination as a young Leeds fan.
100%. I mean, for me, that's when I started falling in love with football to start with. My dad took me to some Champions League nights, 99, 2000 kind of era, and I got into it. And when I was in the park, I always pretended to be Alan Smith when all my mates pretended to be, Dwight York or Andy Cole or Teddy Sheringham or Michael Owen. Because, I mean, even though I'm fairly local. I grew up in Bradford, and in and around me, really, it was predominantly. It wasn't really Leeds fans. It was predominantly Manchester United, especially at the time, given how big and successful they were at the time. And then the odd Bradford fan. There was an odd Leeds fan, but we had as diamonds of his own, didn't we? And it certainly was a good time to be a Leeds fan. I remember fondly being, quite proud of being a Leeds fan back then. In that we'd still kind of had a reputation from what we were in the past, and we were still successful. People considered Leeds to be a threat to winning the Premier League. While they never did at the time, they were always considered an outside chance. Probably how people, I think, see Spurs now. I think that's kind of where I would think of us back then. And that season in particular is a real interesting one. And when you kind of asked me to think of the topic for this week after the Gala discussion, I think this is the one that kind of would stoke the most kind of fire in fans listening and talking about it. Because as much as we kind of fondly remember them, and we all do, we love that team, and we can talk about some of the bit part players that were in that team and still think of them really fondly. Oh, they were a good player, they were good in the squad or whatever. if you actually, in my opinion, if you break it down and look at the squad, it's hard to make a case for the fact that many of them, not all of them, but many of them would go on to then, would fit into a Premier League winning team. Would Chelsea have bought any of them in the Mourinho era? Or would Manchester United gone and picked many of them up to go and, play, top end Premier League? And I know a couple of them did, and we'll get to them. But I think if you actually look at the individuals, you would struggle to make that case. And I know that that's probably going to rile a few people up. But I just think it's the fact. I think the squad together was way better than the sum of its parts. I think there was something about that dynamic, the mixture between the experience and the youth that we had then, and some real natural talent within that squad as well that just worked. And O'Leary put it all together in a mixing pot that worked for a period of time. It was clear, and again, we'll get on to this, that after Leeds, O'Leary didn't have the minerals to make it as a top-level manager, but how did he nearly win the Champions League? How did that kind of pot all end up working in the way that it did? It's just it's a fascinating period of time if you think about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this whole period, I mean, I was probably about 16, 17 in this particular season, and this kind of era of Leeds is the most successful era that I've experienced as a Leeds fan, despite not winning anything. Obviously, those heights that we reached, the league position, the Champions League run, the UEFA Cup runs, for me, it's cemented in my mind. Even when we were in League One, I still thought Leeds are a Premier League team in waiting. And this last run we had in the Premier League, it really, I was convinced this was the start of the next generation, the next era of Leeds getting into Europe, getting into, those top 5, 6 positions. And it hasn't worked out. It proves how difficult it is actually to do that. But certainly this team absolutely fired my imagination. I always think of Leeds as a top club in the country. I think you're absolutely spot on when you say we were kind of the Tottenham of the day, really. We never actually win anything, but we
flirted with it all the time.
We flirted with it, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have a look through the players now. We're going to kind of go through, because it was quite interesting when I was making the list, the names I'd forgotten, and looking at their contributions and looking at what they did after Leeds. And it's interesting because I think you're absolutely right. I think we have this idea, maybe slightly rose-tinted, that it was full of world-class talent or it was full of elite talent and we were just at the top end of the spectrum. But when you look at it, it might perhaps be not. And I think also we get some clues as to why it kind of fell away as well with some of the signings, which you could argue weren't really necessary. So it'd be interesting to get people's takes on that. So what I've done is I've started by looking at who made the most appearances that season for Leeds, the 2001-2002 season. So we're going to start from the least appearances and we're going to finish up with the one who made the most. So the first man on the list, it's this guy, Michael Dewberry. He made 76 appearances for Leeds. He scored 4 goals and he got 0 assists. Jason, talk to me, Michael Dewberry.
I mean, he kind of epitomises kind of what I'm talking about in this squad. And don't get me wrong, successful squads need squad players. But Michael Dewberry didn't look out of place in the Championship, did he? I mean, he then dropped down to the Championship with us, I believe, and he then went on to play again in the Championship. He was a solid, okay defender, but to think that you're going to win a Premier League title with him starting games, and I know he didn't start many that particular season, but he has, he played a lot in the season that we got relegated, didn't he?
Yeah.
He played a lot of games that year. If you look back, him and Stephen Caldwell, if you remember, played a lot of games, and Rocky Jr. came in and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I mean, what is there really to say about Jukes?
Yeah, for me, he was probably the least of the centre-backs we had in and around that time when O'Leary was there. And he was actually, I remember the first few times I saw him, I thought, definitely a squad player, not a starter. When you look at the quality of the other players, I think certainly looking at his career as a whole, you're absolutely right. He wasn't someone who went from strength to strength from Leeds or anything like that. I know he had issues as well with everything that had happened with the Lee Bowyer and Woodgate thing. I know there was all that kind of bubbling away in the background as well, which wouldn't have been easy for him. But certainly, yeah, certainly a player on the lesser spectrum. He's not someone who really stands out from that era at all, I wouldn't say. The next man, I found this one pretty interesting because probably another man who was on the periphery, certainly was this season. We've got Jason Wilcox, who looks like he's sneaking up behind someone on that picture there. But he, for Leeds, made 105 appearances. He scored 6 goals. He got 7 assists. For me, Wilcox is an interesting one. He didn't seem to kind of fit in with the kind of player profile or the type of player we had in the squad when he first came in, but he kind of carved out a little niche for himself. Although those kind of statistics there, I mean, for a winger, 7 assists, is that...
In an era when wingers crossed a lot.
Yeah, they don't do him that. Doesn't speak so favourably of Jason there, does it really?
Wilcox is a funny one because he's a Premier League winner as well. Is Jason Wilcox, I believe, from the mid-90s with Blackburn, and he was an England international as well. I believe. He had some pedigree. He's definitely. I mean, if he was to be around in the modern day game, you wouldn't see him above League One because it just doesn't exist. The way that football's played in the Premier League now, it wouldn't fit his game at all. But he certainly played his part in that team. But he also was directly behind Harry Kewell in the pecking order, which obviously would have been difficult for anybody. I think he made a fair, contribution to that squad. But again, would he have got in any of them sides above us?
No, difficult to argue. Gail liked him anyway, so fair play. Guys, get your comments in on these players as well. Let us know what you thought of these guys coming up. Up next, now this is definitely a guy who I thought was elite. Jonathan Woodgate, 139 appearances, 5 goals, 3 assists. Should have been way more appearances for his talent and the fact that he came through at Leeds. I mean, he was phenomenal. I mean, when he broke into the team a few years before this season, I mean, he looked fully formed as a defender from minute 1. I mean, he was a Rolls Royce, wasn't he?
I would argue, Browney, that he's the best centre-back the country's seen throughout that whole period. And I'm talking Ferdinand, Terry, Ledley King, Sol Campbell. I would say that he was better than them all. Just unfortunately for Woody, his knees were made out of biscuits and he had a serious injury crisis throughout his whole career. I mean, in the kind of recce for this pod, I had a look this morning and I messaged you, didn't I? And I said, can you believe that Jonathan Woodgate, out of his whole career, only played over 30 times, 3 times? He only made 30 appearances in 3 seasons out of his whole career. He only made 330 league appearances throughout the whole of his career. He made the most appearances for Leeds in 5 years than he did in all of his contributions for all of his other teams. Like, how can that be the case? I mean, the amount of times that he didn't even appear. When he signed for Real Madrid, he made no appearances in that first season. 0 through a full 12-month out injured. His career is almost such a waste. And he still went on to achieve, a fair amount. Capped by England 10 plus times, I think it was. A League Cup winner, played for Real Madrid. He still managed to achieve an insane amount, considering the fact that he was always dealing with them injuries. Fantastic player. One of the ones that I would put, in that elite category that we didn't have many, but I would say that he was one of them. But even that season, he only made 11 Premier League starts. Yeah, it's just crazy.
It's bonkers, isn't it? I think a fit Jonathan Woodgate plays for any defence in the world at that time and looked completely at home. I mean, he was outstanding when he went to Newcastle in the appearances he did make for them. He was outstanding. He was one of those players, he could be out injured for God knows how long, come back, and he was still right up to the level. Gail Woodgate, what a centre back. CB, Woody was class. Kevin, absolute class. CB says here, such a shame about injuries, but he was definitely a standout, and I would have just loved to have seen him and Rio get like a run of games together. Would have just been, and nobody would have scored past us, I don't think.
Am I right in thinking that Radaby was out all of that season?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, he was pretty much done, wasn't he, then?
I'm pretty sure he was injured for the whole of that
year. He didn't make any appearances. Yeah, he's not on this list, no. So, up next, a bit of a controversial one. How can we forget about this man? Seth Johnson, 58 appearances, 4 goals, 6 assists, signed from Derby for about 7 million.
For me, just an unnecessary signing, the wrong signing.
Wrong on so many levels, so many stories about him signing and Ridsdale giving him more money than he even expected. And I mean, just a disaster, really, wasn't it, Jace? I mean, this was not the player at that time that was going to elevate us, was it? This was exactly the type of signing that I mentioned at the start where, you know, we were 3rd, 4th, 5th in the league, Champions League semi-finals. Seth Johnson.
He'd obviously come through at Derby and appeared. I think his reputation was that he was going to be the next big thing in an English centre midfielder, and we, I think, kind of tried to steal a march and go out and sign him, and all the stories around the wage. And I think the story is that the agent was going to say that he wants 20 grand, and then Ridsdale came in and went, "We're going to offer you 40 grand, no more. That's it. Take it or leave it." And it's like, what an amazing set of negotiation from Seth. Seth Johnson, I think, were on 3 grand a week before that or something, I read. But that just epitomizes everything that was going on behind the scenes at the time, doesn't it? So, but yeah, certainly a completely needless signing. Was never good. Again, huge injury issues. I remember him coming back and playing for Derby at Ellen Road in the Championship years after, I don't know, maybe our 2nd or 3rd season down. Maybe it was the season we got relegated. I can't remember. From the Championship down to League One. And he absolutely bossed the game at centre midfield, playing as like a DM for Derby when he'd gone back there. I remember it clear. I was only about 15, but I remember it so clear because he was fantastic, but that was at Championship level. Yeah. So yeah, terrible signing. Just epitomises everything that kind of was wrong with us at the time, I think.
Yeah, exactly. CB who, lol. Kevin, oh dear. Mark, thanks for your comments, guys. I seen him have one good game. It's not the one Jason was on about, was it?
Again, I'm going to say this a lot because I'm kind of, I don't want to say like I'm fighting the corner of was the team really that good, but again, would them teams around us have made that signing?
No,
they just wouldn't have. They wouldn't have. And he was part of the squad that were first top of the league in January. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
That is bonkers, isn't it? Absolutely bonkers. CB, 9 million we paid for him, I think. Oh, goodness, was it that much?
I think Wikipedia says 9 million, yeah.
Oh,
some stats up in front of me.
Right, let's improve our mood
by bringing out this player next, who actually I thought made more appearances this season, but it was less than I thought. But it's Mr. Olivier Deco, who made 82 appearances, scored 3 goals, and got 2 assists.
Now, this for me, this is where you're stepping up a bit now.
So Olivier Deco for me was fantastic.
I absolutely loved him. I thought he had a real purple patch for Leeds where he was just everything you'd want in a central midfield player. I thought when he ended up leaving Leeds because I think he fell out with Terry Venables. I thought surely an elite club's going to go for him, but it didn't really happen that way for him. I think he ended up at Roma. And he had a couple of mixed spells here and there. Certainly at Leeds, him and Batty in that centre midfield for that run as well were just absolutely first class. But your thoughts on Deco, Jess?
I think Deco is one that Leeds fans remember so fondly as a top player. I would put him personally just below world class. I would put him in the top class bracket, remembering what the bar is to be world class. To be that very best. 21 appearances for France. Fantastic all-round midfielder, very technically good, read the game extremely well, was good in the tackle, but more importantly was fantastic with the passing going forward, split the lines extremely well. Always think about the day against Liverpool. It was the 4-3, it was unplayable that day. It was fantastic. Low appearances in the league that season. I'm guessing that was due to I'm guessing there was probably an injury, but I would probably guess that it was selection too because of some of the options that we had in and around that team at the time. Top player.
Are you surprised not more goals and assists through his career there, or for 82 appearances?
Yeah, maybe. I don't think he was really ever that kind of player though. He was more the water carrier, a bit like if you think of N'Golo Kante at Leicester. Not quite as dynamic and as defensive minded as Kante, but Kante wouldn't get a lot of goals or assists, but he would do so much to help his team in that midfield area, key part of the pitch. I loved Deco just the same as everybody else did, and I would argue that an Ollie Deco would probably get into a lot of squads. Maybe not the starting 11, but I would argue that he would have the ability to get into a lot of teams around the world. I would say he's one of them that's in and around that fringe.
Indeed. CB, Deco, what a great midfield. Gale, Deco thought he was great. Skip, Deco and Batty, my all-time best players, both battle-hardened with quality. Kevin, good player, him. And CB, if I remember rightly, was at Everton, then moved abroad. Leeds signed him. Yeah, he was indeed.
He came back and played for Fulham later on in his career as well. He had another spell in the Premier League.
Yeah,
he travelled around. He played for a few big clubs.
Yeah, he did. Not a world class, but very useful player, Deco. Yeah, it was an interesting one because we kind of got him at his peak, I think, actually.
I think so.
When he was probably like 26 or something. And he for me, was a real step up. And I think if only we'd have spent money like that across the squad more frequently, we could have really elevated ourselves because he was a brilliant, brilliant signing.
We sold him for 4 million to Roma as well. 4 million. And bear in mind, we paid 9 million for Seth Johnson.
I mean, it's just, it's bonkers, isn't it? Absolutely bonkers. Next man on our list, Robbie Keane. 56 appearances, 18 goals, 2 assists. Initially came on loan from Inter Milan, and then we signed him permanently. Big money as well. I think it was 12 million or something, I think, if I can remember rightly. I remember thinking at the time, we're quite loaded on strikers here.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? I mean, we seemed really overloaded in some spots, some places in the team. And I think Robbie Keane was a little bit of a victim of that because he never quite got the game time you would have expected. Certainly a very talented player. What did you make of him? I mean, would you describe him as elite or that level, couple of levels below that? Or
again, I would say that Robbie Keane's a top level striker. I would never have classed him world class. I think he had some purple patches in his career, which then saw him get some good moves. He had really good spell at Spurs after us. Playing in and amongst Peter Crouch, Jermaine Defoe, some good strikers. I think during his time at Leeds, I think O'Leary especially really liked Viduka and Smith. That tended to be the partnership. And then obviously we brought in Robbie Fowler, who will come up at some point as well. And back then you often found that teams would play with 2 strikers. It was often 4-4-2. So having 2 bench options like that was, it was strong. I mean, we certainly were very, very strong in that area of the pitch. I don't ever think we saw the best of him at Leeds, but I don't think we played to his strengths really. And I think he grew more. I think he came more into his forte when he got a little bit older. I think he only came in really because of the injury to Mickey Bridges. Yeah. I think that was the only reason that Robbie really ever came to Leeds. I would say that he would make a decent third striker for most Premier League teams in and around that era, personally.
Yeah, he kind of fit the profile as well. He was very young at the time, up and coming, a lot of potential, a lot of what you hope was resale value, but obviously Leeds' situation at the time dictated otherwise. CB loved Robbie Keane. Kevin a bit less impressed, average striker. Yeah, interesting one because I mean he had an interesting career in Liverpool and Spurs, like you say, and he'd played abroad for Inter Milan. But he was kind of on the edges of it, I think, at Leeds to be quite honest. When did he come in then? Did he wasn't there at the previous season, was he?
Season before, Robbie came in the season before Champions League season.
Wow, blimey, flipping it. Next up, I mean, wow. This man will, I don't know if he'll split opinion or what we think of this guy. I mean, it's Alan Smith, who in many ways was the poster boy for that Leeds United team under O'Leary. His first professional touch as a footballer was him scoring away at Anfield when he was 18, came through the ranks, Yorkshire, born and bred, Leeds through and through, or so we thought. 224 appearances, 54 goals, 12 assists, so many highs with Alan Smith at the club. You know, the goal at the against Lazio away, of course, stands out as one particular one. Really epitomised Leeds, a bit in the kind of David Batty mould of personality.
Exactly.
It ended in tears, I suppose. He went to the old enemy. He went over to Manchester United, but they paid a decent fee. We all know the problems Leeds were in. I thought it was a bit of a shame when we had our centenary celebrations and every player who made over 100 appearances, you know, was invited to go along to that. But I think he didn't come over for it, and it seems like the bridges are somewhat burnt, and I'm sure he'd have loads to say about what really went on at the time. But all in all, a very, very good player. Jason, what did you make of Alan Smith?
I've heard bits as well. Like this is a bit of a weird one, but he bought the house of a friend of mine's in Nottingham when he signed for Notts County. So I heard some bits, and I think he's being quoted on certain podcasts as well as saying X, Y, and Z about what's happened and the opportunities over the years. He has had opportunities to come back. We have inquired about signing him, and I think he just feels like from what I've heard as if there were too many bridges burnt because of what happened. And it's a tricky one because I do believe. I believe that when he came out and said that he'd never play for them, he meant it. I believe that. Who could have foreseen what was coming thereafter? And I then also do believe that he had the opportunity to sign for Everton and he had the opportunity to sign for Man United. Manchester United were willing to pay the full amount up front. Everton weren't, and Leeds rejected that offer out of hand. And the only place he could go, other than the Championship with Leeds United, which would have probably finished us off, was Manchester United. He was good enough to pass off his signing on bonus, which was millions. I think that gets forgotten because he went there. You know, footballers don't have this defined right to just do that kind of thing. That's millions of pounds worth of earnings which were due to him, and he passed it up to give it to the club to try and help the club. I, at the time, was devastated, absolutely devastated. But as I've worked in football and grown up and matured, I have accepted it. I believe that if we would have stayed up, he wouldn't have gone there. He may have left at some point in his career, but I don't believe he would have gone there because we'd have had more to work with. We'd have been able to demand more from X, Y, and Z team. And that's my take on that side of it. As a player, I agree with you completely. I think he epitomises everything that we were about and we are about as Leeds United fans. The passion, the drive, the stamina, the fitness, the determination. One moment always clicks in my head of Smith. In the first game of the season that we went down, he chases a loose ball that goes back to Shea Given against Newcastle. First game of the season at Ellen Road, and he blocks the clearance by the keeper and he scores. And it's Smith all over for me. It's Alan Smith all over. I rated him as a player. He was never a gifted goal scorer. That wasn't his game. He was a pressing forward that harried and looked to kind of bring his team into the game. He served a huge purpose. And for me, in that era, he was massive. He was a massive, massive part of the success that we achieved. And that was why Ferguson went and signed him. I mean, and he played a fair amount of games for Manchester United up until the broken leg. It was never the same player after that. It was never, ever the same player after the injury. It took all of his agility, his speed away. He still then went on to play fairly high level for Newcastle. And, you know, he had an okay career, but he did lose that pace. I think he also lost the fear, the no fear factor that he had. I think that was maybe always on his mind. It was a horrific injury. At the time we celebrated it, again, as I've got a bit older, I kind of think like, yeah. So
yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of a bit sad with Alan Smith, really, how it ended
is.
up. As for me, I feel like there's an alternative dimension where he became an absolute Leeds legend, got over 500 appearances and lifted trophies with us, played his entire career for us, and we build a statue for him or something.
I agree, mate.
that would have been the ultimate for us. I think that would have been what we fantasized for Alan Smith, because he really was the poster boy for it all. And it's a shame. I mean, I remember years later, when he dropped down, and everything, and we had links every summer to re-sign him. And I wanted it to happen. I really, whether I said it out loud or not, I really would have loved to have seen him have like one more hurrah at Leeds. I really would.
Legends and heroes have changed over the generations. You don't get Billy Bremners and Eddie Grays that stay at one club forever. You just don't. And sure, there is some things that you just do and don't do as certain fan bases, whether it be Rangers, Celtic, Leeds, Manchester United, some of the North London derbies and teams or whatever. And Smith, unfortunately, did commit that move. But we also love Gordon Strachan, who made the move to us. You know what I mean? So I think, given the circumstances, given the time, I personally, I'm not saying I love Alan Smith now. Like I wouldn't want to see him come back and be on the coaching staff or anything. But my kind of peace has been made with him, and I certainly loved him as a player. Absolutely loved him as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Get to some of your comments on Smithy now. Kevin, love Alan Smith when he linked up with Viduka, a bit of a hothead. Gail, though, going to Man United, not good. CB, his injury at Man United was horrific. It absolutely was. Arthur, a little less forgiving. Alan Smith is a right. Hey, we welcome all aspects on this. Absolutely, indeed.
I still get it. I get it. I get it. And I hated him for years and years and years. I did. But I believe that if you were to speak to him, I feel like you would come away from the conversation feeling very differently.
Yeah, indeed. And Arthur, putting on that red shirt, can't forgive him. Sorry, that's me. Fair enough. Now, Mark's asking Gary Kelly. Well, you've read my mind, because up next is Gary Kelly. 508 appearances, 4 goals, 15 assists. I mean, Jason, you were talking then, most players last 30 years have made nowhere near 500 appearances for the club. But Gary Kelly absolutely did. Played his entire career at Leeds. A fantastic servant for Leeds, a decent player, 4 goals, 15 assists. Probably one of the less spectacular players that you would say. And I think when Danny Mills came to the club, he seemed to play second fiddle, certainly for a time there. But Gary Kelly, Jason, what did you make of old Gaza?
I mean, I love Gary Kelly. Some of my favourite moments, thinking certainly the championship season when we first went down and then got to the playoffs. I think really fondly of him then, because I was a season ticket holder through them years, and he stuck by us. He's absolutely Leeds through and through. He certainly is a modern day hero. I think he's an all-time hero. I think he's a legend up there with the likes of Eddie Gray and Strachan and, Bremner, Lorimer. I think he's in that category of player in terms of what he means to us as a club. I personally think he was a 7 out of 10 player. I don't think, again, I'm going to say it. Arthur's put there, Ian Hart, Gary Kelly, both brilliant players. I don't think they were brilliant top-end Premier League players. I don't think Gary Kelly gets ahead of Gary Neville at Manchester United as an example. I love him more. I would always pick Gary Kelly, but in terms of his ability and his quality, I think that's my opinion. I think if we've been brutal on it, taking away the bias and the love that we have for some of these players, that's what Gary Kelly was. I don't even think he'd get into an all-time Leeds United 11 if you're thinking of ability.
No, I don't.
And you've made the point about Danny Mills. I can't stand Danny Mills personally. If you go and listen to some of the stuff that he says nowadays, he's a cretin of a man. I cannot stand listening to him. Honestly, go and listen to him on the Under the Kosh podcast if you've not ever listened to him, especially the first one. He talks about Leeds horrendously, as if he was like this oracle. He's just an horrible man. But I didn't rate Danny Mills that highly. I think he was a good player for Leeds. I think he was an all right player for Leeds. But the fact that Danny Mills came in and then kind of ousted Gary Kelly during that period of time kind of says where he was in the pecking order of his ability. So, I love Gary Kelly. I want to make that clear. I absolutely love Gary Kelly. I just don't think, again, when we're talking about how good was this team, was he... what is he in the conversation with Cafu? Is he in the conversation with Gary Neville? Some of the best right backs, Zambrotta. Would if you'd have had the option of Zambrotta or Gary Kelly in ability, which one would you take? That's what we're talking about. They're the players that would have been able to win the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it hard to disagree with that. Gary Kelly, one of our best ever players for Leeds. Arthur Island could do with these players now. Let's have a look. Gail, you'll have to let us know what you disagree with Jason with.
I'm okay with disagreements on this as well, because this is always going to.
Oh yeah, it's definitely we encourage it.
Yeah, 100% encourage it. Like it's definitely not a negative, and I want to make it really clear. I love this team. This is when I fell in love with Leeds United. 2000, 2001, going into 2002. Absolutely love this team. I want to be try and be unbiased to the topic of the conversation of how good this team actually was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's an interesting one. He's Gary Kelly. I mean, it would, because he broke through actually not long after the '92 team as well. He played that long for us. He's kind of got tailbacks all the way to there. Okay, next up, a bit of a controversial one as well. Robbie Fowler, 32 appearances for the club, 14 goals, 1 assist. Now, this at the time was huge. We had signed God from Liverpool. This is who the cop referred to as God. We had taken their boy, power move. Leeds United had gone in and taken Liverpool's man, Robbie Fowler. It felt huge. It was for 11 or 12 million pounds, and it felt like a real power move. However, when you look at the facts, was he already way past his best? I think certainly when you look at it, he was. It became kind of, not really a signing we needed. I don't believe. I think we found it difficult to get him off the wage bill later on as well. I think it caused all kinds of issues where we're paying him to play for Man City or whatever the hell it was that we did. Caused a massive problem. He got in on the team, obviously. I mean, actually, I would encourage you, though, to nip over to YouTube and watch Fowler's Leeds United goals. He scores about... Oh, my God. I think he scores about 10 or 11 this season. And, I mean, the finishing is superb. There's no doubt. But I do think he was past his best. At the time, it was argued, have we leapfrogged Liverpool into that kind of next spot down in the league where we're going and taking their players? For me, it might have felt a little bit like that at the time, but certainly looking back, I don't think it was in any way. An unbelievable finisher. When he broke through at Liverpool, he was, incredible. But for me, again, a signing, I look at it and go, is that what that team needed? I mean, the recruitment, when you look at it, you just think, why did we waste so much money on it? I just don't. We had Alan Smith, Mark Viduka, Robbie Keane. It boggles the mind.
He's arguably England's most natural finisher ever. Yeah. He is in that conversation. I'm not saying he is, but he's in that conversation.
Yeah.
You go and watch his prime days before he signed for Leeds at Liverpool. He was unbelievable. His composure in front of goal, and Brown is spot on. Like the highlight reel of him scoring goals for Leeds is unbelievable. And that season, I could just got it to the side of me. He scored 12 in 22, which is a hell of a ratio when you consider Matt Viduka got 12 in 33 as our next person in line of goals. So hell of a player, but we definitely got him past his best. I think Fowler wasn't particularly concentrating on being the best on the pitch. I think that's why Gerard Houllier got rid of him. He fell out with Houllier. And I think everything that you then saw then after, he still had that natural ability, but he never really had his eye on the prize. And that's why he never went on to make that many appearances for England. We never saw the best of him for England ever, even when he was in his heyday at Liverpool. He never he liked the life too much. From what I've heard of him outside of the game, he started in real estate really early, and fair play to him. He got himself really sorted. I mean, he's a prime example of how you do sort yourself out after football's over, because he's a multi-millionaire through property investments and stuff. So we definitely never saw the best of him. even though them stats would consider, it's nearly a goal every other game through his whole career at Leeds. So
yeah. Indeed. Gale, Fowler past his best. CB, yes, we got him too late, really. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to know what they were thinking with recruitment with some of these players. I really do. Interesting stuff.
Different time of scouting that will, Brown.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? Yeah. Robbie Fowler, he's good, isn't he? Right.
Yeah.
11 million.
Yeah.
And the money we were throwing around as well. Christ almighty. Next up, an interesting one. Eric Baka, 194 appearances, 2 goals. 20 goals rather. Sorry, 5 assists. What can you say? A steady Eddie, really, wasn't he, Eric Baka? He never kind of dazzled. He never kind of shone too brightly, but he was steady and he chipped in with goals and assists, as you can see. Made a fair few appearances as well, nearly 200 appearances for Leeds. Certainly played his part, but again, ties into that thing of, would he been at another top club? I'm not too sure.
It wouldn't. He just wouldn't. He was an okay all-rounder. You kind of sum it up perfectly. I remember when we went down to the Championship, he were having really bad chronic knee injuries by this point, and he weren't playing very much. But again, similar to Seth Johnson, because he was there in the first season, and we saw them fleetingly, and at that level, they stood out by an absolute mile. And again, so they should, I guess. But yeah, I'm of that opinion for the amount of appearances that he made especially during that time. He played a lot of games that season. Would he have played a part in a Premier League winning team? I don't think he probably would have done. He was just an okay all-rounder that played his part. He could play on the right, play in the centre, filled in some positions. He could even play right back. So, but yeah, steady player.
Yeah. Indeed, yeah. Gale, Eric, he did well for us. CB, Baka was steady. Nothing special. Up next then, one of the big hitters during the O'Leary era, certainly. Notorious for sometimes the wrong reason and the right reason. He did shine quite frequently. It's Lee Bowyer, 260 appearances, 54 goals and 19 assists. Goal scoring midfielder. We all remember those energetic driving runs from midfield, and he beat the offside trap and nick a goal. Remember his goal at Anfield? He did just that. Yeah. Brought a lot of controversy with him as well. Obviously, we know the court case and everything, which really cast a massive shadow over the entire club for a period of time, despite him playing his best football when that was going on. Ended a little bit acrimoniously as well with transfer requests and all this kind of thing. But another player like Alan Smith that epitomised the best of Leeds, great determination and a nice bit of skill to him as well. Was there before O'Leary as well, so he'd been kind of a mainstay for a while. I think he was signed by Howard Wilkinson, in fact. A really solid career with really good numbers as well there, Jason.
Lee Bowyer is a bit of an enigma because you talk about parallel universes. I think there's a parallel universe where Lee Bowyer is switched on off the pitch. He has a reputation that a model footballer should have, and he goes on to have a similar career to a Steven Gerrard or a Frank Lampard. Because I'm not saying he was quite that good, but he was certainly in and amongst that conversation. Played for England, only capped once, but he got in and around that level. There was a period of time at Leeds where he was arguably the heartbeat of that team. Not everything came through him, but so much was delivered by Bowyer. His desire, his box-to-box work, his goals, his contributions in both boxes, hard tackling. And I think ultimately it was just that little screw that was a little bit loose for Bowyer that just kind of stopped him from really having that top elite career. That being said, I do think at the end of the day, that's part of his package. The package was that he wasn't a full shilling. That's the only way that I can kind of put it with him. And I do think that would have refrained top teams from signing him. I think Newcastle then went on to play for Newcastle when Newcastle was still pretty good under Sir Bobby. We've all seen the drama that he created with Kieran Dyer. he then went on to play at Birmingham and won the League Cup at Birmingham. He had a solid career, but I would again argue with everything as the full package for Bowyer, he wouldn't have made it into a Premier League winning team. I just don't see that Arsene Wenger, or Mourinho, or Ferguson would have put up with him.
No.
But hell of a player. I can't kind of critique anything about his time at Leeds other than saying he was arguably one of our top 3 or 4 performers throughout his period of time. Certainly this period of time. I mean, while the court case was going on, it was unplayable. It was unplayable. He was turning up after being at court earlier on in the day and putting in 10 out of 10 performances in the Champions League. It was unbelievable how he was managing to be able to do that. So yeah, I have a hard time with Bowyer.
No, indeed. I mean, he's iconic as well, isn't he? Some of those goals, Champions League nights, and I think when we came from behind to beat Derby, and he scores the winner. There were so many iconic moments with Bowyer as well that stand out in the memory.
I think of that goal against West Brom when Viduka kind of like Cruyff dropped it off to him, and he just hits it first time as he runs onto it, and he curls it all the way into the opposite corner. And the celebration used to be on Match of Day where he just kind of runs away. It was quality. He was a top player. Top player.
Absolutely. And with stats like that as well, he's one of the highest achievers basically in that team as well, definitely. Arthur, now Lee Bowyer was class. Gail, Bowyer thought he was very good, not a manager though. Arthur scored lots of goals from midfield. Mark, 100% that lad. Arthur still think Gordon Strachan was better. Yeah, I would agree.
I would argue. I would agree with
Strachan. You're talking about something there. Now, if you thought he was controversial, Lee Bowyer, this next man might be the most controversial of.
I already know who's coming up. But I can't even see it.
Is Mr. Harry Kewell. 236 appearances for the club, 61 goals, 28 assists. I don't even think it's arguable. I think he was the most talented player of the O'Leary era. A phenomenal player. Pace, power, skill, could head the ball, had everything really at his feet. Was very fit as well when he played for Leeds. He played a lot of football for Leeds. It was kind of after Leeds that it kind of went downhill from him from that point. We know what happened after. Just knocked my mic out of the way. We know what happened after he left Leeds, and we know how that whole thing went. Very ugly, and it it's a crying shame that a player like that cannot be celebrated more because of what's happened since. But it's one of those things where it's just so sensitive that what can you do? A phenomenal player. I mean, let's judge him on kind of this era, and let's look at would he have played for any other elite team at that time. I think the answer is definitely yes. I think they're all trying to sign him for several years as well. Just on the player, Jason, I mean, where do you start with
I'll just start by just saying that for me, I can't stand Harry Kewell in terms of what he then went on to do, and that's I think there's a very distinct difference between him and Smith in terms of who he is, what he's about, what he carries, how he carries himself. And then what he then went on to do. I think that was very different. I'm just going to say that. On him as a player, the best player I've ever seen. The best player I've ever seen in a League shirt that I've seen live at a game. He was ridiculous. He was, for me, the best left midfielder in the world when he was at Leeds. I genuinely believe that. When I'm comparing, say, Gary Kelly to Cafu, Zambrotta and Neville, and saying that I would, in terms of ability, I wouldn't have picked him. I would have picked this lad over any left midfielder in the world. Ryan Giggs. I think he was miles better than Ryan Giggs. And anybody else that you want to kind of put in, he's in that conversation. Kaká was around at the time. Rivaldo, he's right up there with all of them. The Leeds United version that we got to see and enjoy before then the injuries kind of came at Liverpool. He was a stupendous player. I think about the goal against Arsenal that kept us up that season, the season after this. It's just freakish ability. The goal away at Sheffield Wednesday when he, early on in his career, and he just takes it on the edge of the box and he curls it with the outside of his left foot. His crossing ability, and like Brandon says, his heading ability was underrated as well. He was very good in the air. The goal against Manchester United always comes to mind with that. Just super talented, skillful, tricky winger. who could play inside. It's freakishly talented, real top. And for me, the best player that we've had since the title winning team.
Yeah,
for all round talent and ability. The only player that even kind of comes close to reminding me of Harry Kewell is Rafinha. Yeah. He's the only player that we've had similar to him.
Yeah. God, yeah, absolutely. We've had some wingers in our time, haven't we? Gale, I loved him, Harry, but I know a lot of Leeds fans don't like him. Arthur should stay at Leeds. As soon as he went to Liverpool, his career was over. CB, we had to sell him, though, Arthur.
I would argue that the injuries were what cost him, not the move to Liverpool. Yeah. Bear in mind, he still went on to win the Champions League.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he played, didn't he?
Started the game, came off injured.
Yeah, Kewell went to Liverpool. Sad day for me. Yeah, I mean that's kind of where the problem started as well, because the agent palaver as well. I remember that clear as day. His agent, and honestly, it was. I think the first time I was truly aware of the agent situation, how much power they can have in everything, and it was an ugly one.
Bear in mind the year prior to that, we'd apparently turned down 40 million from Real Madrid for him as well.
Yeah,
and it just goes to show you just how bad the management was, because the fact that some clubs you have to sell, there's a price that you have to sell. 40 million was a lot of money then. 40 million gets you a fairly average Premier League player now. But back then it was top money. And then a year later we're selling for 5 million because of the position that we're in. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just staggering, isn't it? Absolutely staggering. Moving on then, the next man we've mentioned him a little bit already. It's Jason's favourite. It's Danny Mills, who I've got to agree with you. I think he's soured that relationship.
Have you seen the?
Yeah, I've heard so many things that he's come out and said over the years, and it's horrible, it's just absolute head scratching. And at the time I liked him as a player. I really did. I thought he had that kind of, again, he kind of fit that kind of Bowyer Smith kind of role where he was like motoring down that right full-back role. He got 140 appearances, 4 goals, 1 assist. He was always driving forward. I mean, he got to the 2002 World Cup at the end of this season, by the way. Neville was out. And he did all right, actually. He did all right. I remember against Brazil, he went on a great run against Brazil and nearly got himself a goal against what were going to be the world champions. A solid career for Leeds. Again, someone, though, you look after Leeds, what did he do? Man City and... again, not an elite player, not at the top end of the spectrum. One of those players that I think definitely fit when it worked at Leeds. It was better than the sum of its parts, I think. Him as a player, Jace, what did you think?
Yeah, I definitely can respect what he brought to that Leeds team. He was a bit of a marauding fullback. He carried the ball quite well. I think him and Kelly quite often played together down that right-hand side at times as well. So sometimes they would play both of them. He was particularly good with Bowyer on that side. It was a good player. It was a solid option for us. But again, I would just argue that he would never win a Premier League title. I don't think there's anything. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Eric Baka kind of conversation we're having. He's just a solid all-round, average, run-of-the-mill player that did have some purple patches for Leeds. And I agree with you. I think he fit the criteria of what we were about at the time.
Was he at Leeds when Thierry Henry absolutely murdered him? It's like a famous clip, and Henry's just absolute. I think he were either at Leeds or Man City, and he's trying to kick Thierry Henry all over the place.
It was
Thierry Henry is just
playing with him, basically.
Just everything about that his period of time, like even when he was trying to get out towards the back end, when he went out on loan, and maybe I'm just being too sour with what I think he's about. I just don't like him. Don't like him as a person, which does maybe create a bit of bias the other way. But I just don't think he was ever an elite right back. Well, he definitely wasn't an elite right back. Definitely wasn't an elite right back. He was an okay Premier League right back.
Yeah, but still, do you think he was above Gary Kelly for this period of time, do you think?
I would have played Kelly in terms of the overall package of what Kelly gives you over Danny Mills personally. But I understand it. I think Danny Mills was a bit better going forward than Kelly was. And I think Kelly was a bit better defensively. So I think it's horses for courses, isn't it? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Indeed. Gail Mills did well, but I can't stand listening to him now. Exactly. CB, more miss than hit for me. And Arthur, Danny Mills, hit, miss for me. Which is it, Arthur? Hit or miss? Come on. So, yeah, that was always going to be an interesting one with him there. Let's have a look. Who have we got next? Oh. What can you say about this next player? I mean, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, David Batty.
249 appearances, 3 goals, 11 assists. I'm totally biased. He's my favourite Leeds United player of all time. He had 2 spells with the club. He won 2 league titles, 1 Division 1 title, 1 Division 2 at the time title. Just an absolute legend for me. Yeah. Elite quality, played for Kenny Dalglish, played for Kevin Keegan, played for Glenn Hoddle in the England team. I mean, he's probably arguably got the most international appearances out of anyone on the list other than like the Aussie boys.
Yeah.
I mean, where on earth do you start? I mean, the fact that when he came back to Leeds for his second spell, he was ravaged with injuries. He got through it, formed an unbelievable partnership with Ollie Deco. Where do you even start with Batty, really, Jason?
I mean, we discussed actually doing a show on is David Batty the most underrated English midfielder ever, aren't we? Or Leeds player ever. We
that will happen, by the way.
We will do that at some point and to speak specifically about him. He's my favourite Leeds player ever also. He for me, epitomised everything about being a midfielder and a Leeds midfielder specifically. But not only that, he was extremely talented. People are so quick to forget just how good David Batty was. I think some of that comes from the fact that he has chosen to take himself out of the media. He doesn't like football. I've read his autobiography. He can't stand football. His dad forced him into playing and drilling him every day. And he carved a fantastic career out and out of that, and has been able to then live away from the cameras, if you like, because of it. And fair play to him. I actually have more respect for him for doing that. But his ability, his passing ability, his technique, he could carry the ball well. He was never a goal scorer, obviously. He was never really one, again, to really get too many assists either. But his vision and reading of the game, his strength in the battle, the tackle, he was just a fantastic defensive midfielder who would, in my opinion, fit into any era. Like, don't get me wrong, he won't be able to get away with some of the tackles that he used to do, but I believe that he could have developed his game into being, still being right. I personally would have put him in any team in the world. I think he's one of a few that can say that, along with Kewell and Mr. Rio when we get to him. He won 2 top league titles. He won the league with Leeds and then went on to win the Premier League at Blackburn. Didn't play much that season, however, due to injuries. I think he refused his medal, if I'm right.
Refused his medal, yeah.
Which again just says everything about who David Batty is as a person. There's so much I could say about David Batty. 46 appearances, I think it was, for England. Again, he could kind of just spin away from the fact that he missed that penalty against Argentina in '98. It's one of my first football memories, actually. But because of the kind of character he was, it was like, well, I stepped up and I took it, and the shot was saved. Like, that's the kind of guy that he is. And he still had the balls to step up and take the most pressured penalty you're probably likely to ever see against the Argies in a game where David Beckham goes and gets himself sent off, and Beckham would have taken that penalty. Yeah. David Batty steps up and takes the 5th penalty. That's the kind of guy that he is, and the kind of player that he was. What more can I say about him? And he was massive for that team. Massive. David O'Leary's side was extremely young, and David Batty created that experience that we needed at the time, gave us that leadership along with his qualities. Top player.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with absolutely everything you've said there. Yeah, he absolutely phenomenal. CB, yes. Bats, Gale, Batty, absolutely fabulous.
mark. Did he ever misplace a pass? He was brilliant, never scored though, but then you've corrected yourself after he did score against Manchester City at home. Remember that one? Everyone went bonkers. CB, one of our greatest players, played for us in 2 eras and he didn't really like football. No, exactly. What a midfielder with Batty's first spell. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about Batty all day because I absolutely think he's just phenomenal. He played for all the top, certainly domestic managers of that era as well, barring obviously Ferguson and but Keegan, Dalglish. I think it just speaks like he played for absolute top teams. It used to drive me nuts when everyone was like, Claude Makelele invented the DM role. I'm like, no, have you never watched David Batty? Go away. You need to go back and watch David Batty. But he was. I thought this was really good as well. I think another reason why he's not really spoken about that much these days is, yes, because he doesn't, flog himself around the media, but also football was different then. There wasn't, hundreds of live games. You wouldn't get to see what, he wasn't in the highlights on Match of the Day because that wasn't what he did. So, it wasn't showcased as much. If he'd have been around today, I mean, God, he'd have been,
You'd be looking at Rodri. You'd be looking at Rodri. That's the level of player that he is. I would argue that he'd get into any team in the Premier League back then. I would argue that he was better than Roy Keane. And Man United fans would just argue blindly at that without even knowing what they're talking about. But I would say he was a better all-round player than Roy Keane. I think Roy Keane probably was a bit better going forward. People forget how good Roy Keane was in the 90s, especially at getting goals. It was later on in his career that he stepped a little bit further back. But for me, Batty was a better passer. It was a better tackler. And was just a better all-round central midfielder. And that's why a lot of managers trusted him with that position. And I've seen a few different. I think it was Nigel Martin who was on Soccer AM a few years ago now, I'm talking, but he was putting together his best all-time team. And think about some of the players that he played with at England. He picked David Batty to be in that midfield. He played with Gerrard, Lampard, played with all of them, and he picked David Batty to play in that centre midfield. So
didn't get nervous, did he? If he want one of them players that crumbled just because of a crowd, he was like, I'll just go out and play like I'm kicking about in the back garden. Phenomenal mentality, everything. Next man on the list, Dominic Matteo, 145 appearances, 4 goals, 3 assists. The most famous goal, of course, being that one at the San Siro, unforgettable times. For me, fits into the kind of solid utility kind of role. I know he's kind of played a little bit all over the park, wasn't he? Especially when injuries bit hard. A good player, a solid player, Jason. Like I say, one of those that fits into that kind of squad view, isn't it? Rather than being kind of a standout talent.
100%. And I would argue, like, this is going to sound defamatory, but I would argue that he's playing too many games to again be involved in a team that would be hoping to finish first in the Premier League. I loved on Matteo. It was a fantastic centre-back. Had a great career, did well at Liverpool before coming over to Leeds, and then went on to play for, I think, Stoke and Blackburn after us. He was a solid all-round player, but he had to play way too many games to really be serious about winning the league. Either centre-back, centre midfield, and left-back. I mean, it was the season that we went down, he was literally trying to carry the whole team on his own. It was ridiculous, and he just didn't have that. He didn't have that ability to be able to do it. That's what, again, a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 most week kind of player.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And it never kind of really brought through at international level or anything, did he really? Don Matteo.
Did he play for Scotland? I think he maybe made a few appearances for Scotland. I think he did.
Yeah, it was. I think that's a test as well, isn't it? How many international appearances did they get as well? Certainly the next man on the list certainly got a few international appearances. It's Rio Ferdinand. 73 appearances, 3 goals, 2 assists. Those 73 appearances, though, what a set of appearances they were. A phenomenal defender, one of the best defenders of his generation. Yeah. He's won every trophy multiple times, England capped. We got him when he was like 22 or something. He was phenomenal at Leeds. And the World Cup that he went on and played in at the end of that season, the 2002 World Cup, he was sensational for me, defender of the tournament. Yeah. An unbelievable player. We got a really good fee from him as well when we needed it. Obviously, we were struggling. We were in dire straits at that time. We didn't know the full extent, but we got 30 million for him, which was a record at the time for a defender. He went to the old enemy, of course. And I know there's an interview bombing around Twitter recently where he's come out saying Leeds fans are still angry at me, and you get all the Leeds fans are like really on his back. For me, I to be honest, it might seem bizarre, but I don't hold any real grudges against Ferdinand. I really don't feel that vitriol towards Ferdinand. I never have. I never will. He was, for me, he wasn't Leeds through and through. He wasn't a Leeds lad. It's different. It was just, he came. He was we paid a lot of money. Do you remember we paid 18 million for him? Yeah. I mean, wow! At the time, it was like that is crazy, absolutely crazy. But it was worth every penny.
Yeah, it was a great bit of recruitment, wasn't it? Really, if you look back in hindsight, and again, if we'd have not fallen into the problems that we'd have had, we'd have probably been able to command even more than 30 million for him. He's arguably the best centre-back the Premier League's ever seen. I don't think he is, but he's in that conversation again. He could have played in any team in the world. He was elite, absolutely elite. I think there was a period of time at Manchester United where him and Vidic were the best partnership in the world. Fantastic centre-back. His ability to be able to carry the ball at pace for a centre-back, bit before his time. I mean, if he was around now in his prime, it'd be worth 150 million. He was, he's freakishly talented for his height, his agility, and the way that he moved, can carry ball on both feet. He was a good passer of the ball. It was great in the air. There's nothing not to like about Rio Ferdinand. And you said it earlier about him and Woodgate together. If they'd have managed to play together for any period of time, you'd have been talking about the best centre back partnership in the country. Shame, by the way, but I'm same as you. I don't hold him to any sort of kind of accountability for going over there. He owed nothing to Leeds, nothing at all. I have no hate towards him at all, personally. No,
and he's the only one where we got a proper fee for him. He was the only one we made actual money that was his value at the time. So no issues there. Arthur Rio Ferdinand, another good player indeed.
He was one of 3 or 4 that I would have put in any team in the world. He's world class.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. Next man on the list, one of my favourites from the era, I've got to say, Mark Viduka, 165 appearances, 71 goals, 15 assists. I think the most goals we've got of anyone on this list, if I remember rightly. The V-bomb, 4 goals against Liverpool at home. So many good moments. Fantastically talented player. Was he elite though, Jason?
No. He wasn't, and I love him just as much as you do. Very, very talented, extremely talented for a big man. Held the ball up extremely well, but his footwork was fantastic. He was great on both feet, and he was probably, with the exception of Fowler, the most natural finisher in the team. His finishing ability is extremely good. I think I always see that goal that he scored for Middlesbrough, where he just kind of volleys it from about 30 yards out for no reason. It's almost like, why are you even shooting from there? He just volleys it in. Obviously, the game against Liverpool, the 4-3, natural ability to finish, but he wasn't elite. He wasn't in the caliber of striker that, again, some of the other teams had. Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, even Sylvain Wiltord, Van Nistelrooy. He wasn't in that pool of striker. Didier Drogba was coming around at the time. As much as we enjoyed him and loved watching him, and I think of him so fondly. Again, he went on to play for Newcastle, got relegated, and played for Middlesbrough, and was a bit part player in a mid-table team. He was never. It was good value for money. I've just seen the 6 million there bought from Celtic. He was fantastic value for money, but he wasn't elite.
No. I as hard as it is to admit, I think I've probably got to agree, because it's kind of that big man with silky skills kind of vibe going on, wasn't it? Like a Berbatov Ibra type of thing, wasn't it?
He had a great career, though. He had a fantastic career. He really did. I mean, and just had a quick look here, he didn't really play as much as he probably should have done for Australia, but there weren't as many international games back then, especially for the other side of the world. They didn't really play. But you look at his goal scoring record, 30-37 for Celtic, like that, even in the SPL, it doesn't matter. It's still some ratio. 59 in 130, that's league appearances for Leeds. It's a goal every other game nearly. Top player. And I loved watching him. Absolutely loved watching him play.
Yeah, no, great. CB, though, he looked lazy and sluggish at times. Yeah, I mean, there was that aspect to it, wasn't there?
And I'll never forgive him for how he chucked it in against Bolton, because he did. I know a lot of fans have debated this back and forth, but he did. He chucked it in that day. He didn't fancy it, and he got himself sent off when we needed him most. We were on his knees, and he chucked it in. That's how I see it, personally. Yeah.
Does that sour the whole kind of thing, or is it?
I mean,
just tainted. Still appreciate him, like him, but tainted a little bit.
Yeah, that's how I would say. Yeah.
Viduka lot goals. Next man on the list, another stalwart as well. Really, 283 appearances for Mr. Ian Hart, 38 goals and 28 assists. Phenomenal numbers for a left back. I mean, he was someone he was in the team before O'Leary took over properly. His free kicks, his crossing, we all remember that, that it seemed to just happen every other game, didn't it? That he was banging in a free kick or whipping in a cross.
Yeah.
It kind of was symptomatic of the team, though, I remember the Cardiff game in the FA Cup after the turn of the year, and he was dreadful. He had no pace. He got absolutely skinned, and that was it. He seemed to never recover from that moment in a Leeds shirt ever again. But phenomenal stats there, though, isn't it, Jason? Really, for the left back. I mean, 28 assists. I mean, I think it might be.
I mean, I'm probably going to upset some people with this one. But again, I loved him, and if you could just bring a player on for a set piece, I would argue that there were a period of time where Ian Hart was the best set piece taker in the world. Genuinely, like, I think he's ability from free kicks, his ability from penalties, it felt like he was always going to score. His ability to put the ball right into the corner or the side netting from a set piece or a penalty was phenomenal. Freakishly good. I'd have put him up there with Beckham. I genuinely would have put him up there with Beckham at the time in the Premier League. That aside, he was a really poor footballer at times. He was. His ability to be able to cross the ball from a deep position was good, but there was basically a dead set piece, a dead ball. That's how he would have to kind of to do it. He was good at cutting in on his right foot. He had quite a good right foot as well, and scored a few goals on his right foot too. But defensively, he was a poor player, and we forget all that because of the amount of appearances that he made. He was extremely slow, Browney. He was extremely slow. And he
never seemed to. I don't remember it getting exposed like it did from that moment onwards, though, against Cardiff. I don't remember watching him before that, thinking this guy's really causing us trouble defensively.
Football was so different, though, wasn't it? And because teams often played 4-4-2, the winger would be expected to come back and do some defensive work. And I mean, I just look at his career after Leeds, and the heights of the Champions League, to then go on and play for Levante in Spain and get relegated, and then end up in League One at Carlisle and Reading in the Championship. And you're only talking him at being 29, 30. You weren't over the hill. He was still really in what probably should have been the prime of his career. I think he read the waves of that team, and his set piece ability made him so valuable. And I get that. I see James Ward-Prowse the same, and I know he's kind of proving me wrong this season because he's having a good season for West Ham, but that's how I see him. He's so good at it that he has to be in the team, regardless of the other bits of the performance. So that's my take on him. I could get shut down in flames about that one, but that's my take on his time at Leeds.
Yeah, and he was the second most appearances that season on our list. Alison, thanks for your comment, love. Every time he had a free kick, he scored. Yeah, it felt like it, didn't it, for a period of time. The last player on our list then from this season, again, I mean, I've used this word a few times, another stalwart, Nigel Martin, the goalie. 265 appearances for Leeds. I mean, it's goalkeepers. I don't know why I bothered putting the goals and assists on. But I mean, for me, the best keeper I've seen at Leeds, absolutely incredible keeper. For me, absolutely elite. I think he was unfortunate. He was competing against Seaman. For England, I think that went against him. But for me, you didn't get better than Nigel Martyn. I would not have swapped him for any other keeper in the world at that time. I rated him that much.
I actually agree with you. I think he's one that you could probably debate as to whether he'd be a Premier League winner or not. I'd be happy to say that he probably could have been. His agility and his shot-stopping ability was freakishly good. People will forget because of Seaman and some of the other teams that were around. And the fact that he played for Leeds, if he'd have played for Man United or Arsenal...
he'd have been in,
He'd have been heralded as one of the top keepers. He was freakishly good. And by the way, he's only 6 foot. He's not as tall as what you watch it. Look at him in them goals. His agility is what did him. Is it like a old day Pickford? I'm obviously he's better than Pickford, but the way that he moved and the ability to get across goal and make saves. I've actually played against Nigel Martyn, which is pretty cool. Only at 6-a-side, I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe something like that, which was pretty cool. Turned up to play for his son's.
Did you score past him?
I did actually score past him, but it was a terrible finish. Like, I can't even tell people about it because I kind of scuffed it and it deflected off a defender and went in. I did score against him. But it was lovely to meet him, and he's just a top guy, and fantastic goalkeeper. I agree with you completely. He was so unfairly tricked when Robbo came in. Because for me, I think Paul Robinson's one of the most overrated keepers we've ever seen. I cannot believe he played so many times for England. He played at a time when we didn't have any other good options, really. He was an okay keeper, capable of... He just dived too late constantly. He went for that show-reel save all the time. Martyn was way beyond him. And he went to Everton and ended up having good years at Everton when we were left with Robinson. So
well, I always thought, like, with Martyn as well, especially when he first came to Leeds, he was like too good for us. I remember watching him thinking, this guy is too good for where Leeds were at that time. And then, I mean, it surprised me actually because Robbo didn't make any appearances for Leeds this season. Martyn had nailed his position back down and rightly so. But a very interesting one, a top player though. CB, good, solid keeper.
He still made 23 appearances for England as well. Browney. 23 appearances for England as a keeper with no substitute appearances is pretty impressive, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alison, Nigel always took time to talk to fans, great guy. The team used to stay in the Marriott in Leeds, used to hear O'Leary giving them a right rollick in the team talks. Well, that moves us on now to the last piece of the puzzle. It is the manager, David O'Leary, 201 matches as Leeds boss and points per game, 1.72. O'Leary, where do you start? He came in, he was caretaker, and he was brave. He played the youngsters that Graham perhaps had been a little bit more hesitant to do it. But he came in and he started these guys and never finished outside the top 5 as Leeds boss, guided us to a semi-final in the UEFA Cup and the European Cup. It ended after this season. He got sacked for Leeds not qualifying for the Champions League. He moves on to Aston Villa, has a couple of seasons there, but it doesn't work out. And that's his last serious managerial appointment after that. And he was gone and it was done. But there was a time, wasn't there, where we loved him and we thought this was the next big thing in management.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's extremely difficult because you've got the O'Leary at Leeds and then you've got the O'Leary after Leeds. And you can only come to the conclusion that he wasn't that good of a manager. Like, you can't come to any other conclusion. It didn't work out at Villa. Nobody else wanted to take an opportunity, a chance on him. Or maybe he just made enough money that he could go off and sail into the sunset. I don't know. But he was never really considered in and amongst that elite. And I think very similar to the squad and the individuals within the squad, I think he was part of the bigger sum of its parts. I think he was part of that. I think a lot of what came from the squad then came from the individuals within it. I don't think it was tactical and it came from O'Leary's mega brain of being this fantastic tactician. I don't think that. I think he had a fantastic group that he whipped into a frenzy. I think he was probably very motivational. And I think he had a dynamism and an energy within a young team that allowed what we saw for 2-3 years to happen around him. I think he had some really astute people alongside him in the likes of Brian Kidd. I think that gets understated. I think the number 2 that's with the manager is massive. Steve McLaren at Manchester United for years. That as an example, they had Brian Kidd over there as well, didn't they? Quite often these people don't make fantastic number 1s, but they make great number 2s. Real interesting one, and I'd love to hear some stories from behind the scenes on David O'Leary, because I think it's a bit of an enigma. I do.
I agree with that. And CB makes a great point here. O'Leary, not as good as he thought he was, did nothing after Leeds. Writing his book was his downfall. I mean, it's staggering that to that book, Leeds United on Trial. I can't think of a bigger misstep.
Moronic.
And he's revealing dressing room secrets almost. It's like, what on earth was going through his mind at that time? I think he must have started to believe his own hype.
I think he was definitely. Yeah, I think he was definitely starting to think, I'm the main man. Maybe he thought he was going to get the Arsenal job after Wenger. I don't know. But it went badly wrong for him after that. I think, he was riding the crest of a wave of an amazing group of homegrown players that had come through. You had Alan Smith, you had McPhail, you had Woodgate, you had Hart, you had Kelly even, you had this kind of core, you had Bowyer, obviously, and Martin. I think, he was riding the crest of wave of a kind of a nucleus of a team coming through the ranks, and he supplemented it well in some areas. And then other areas, I'm like, why was this person brought to the club? What was the master plan here? What were they thinking here? Because I remember he always used to go on about needing more players, and he was a bit of a checkbook manager, really. The amount of money he spent, and he's tried to wash his hands of, I didn't know what, how much they were spending, this kind of thing. But hello, you're the manager. I think he tried to do the same thing at Villa. I think he tried to spend a lot of money there.
Spent a lot of money at Villa.
Yeah, and it just didn't work at all. And
it was one of those kind of, I think the situation was that
whoever would have taken over at that time were going to have a really good chance of creating a good team because of those players that were coming through. I'm not saying he had nothing to do with it. I think, like you say, motivational, obviously it clicked, obviously it worked. I mean, Deco speaks really highly of him. Deco's come out since and spoken really highly about O'Leary. So I agree. I think it is an enigma. I think I would love to know the truth of it and everything. I think it's fascinating, really, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the manager, and he paid the price at the end of this season, didn't he?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was probably unfairly sacked. It was probably the worst thing that Ridsdale could have done. Really, in hindsight, I bet he wishes he didn't have done it, because the seams were already cracking, and he kind of pulled them apart quicker than he needed to by making that decision, and then bringing Venables in, and the route that obviously we went down then. Just made just terrible mismanagement. I there's no other way that I can say it, because I like to be subjective with how I see something, and I always believe that if he'd have been as good as what we thought he was, or what he thought himself he was, he'd have then gone on to have had a better career than after that success, because he did have success on paper. He could have easily sold a fantastic story to teams, and prepared to give a manager with that kind of CV an opportunity, and he just didn't. It's just strange.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's your squad in the 2001-2002 season.
I think actually going through them all,
and when you look at their statistics, you look at their careers after, the manager included.
I mean, a good friend of mine has always said, he's not a Leeds fan, but he always said to me that
you just simply didn't have the quality of Liverpool or Manchester United in your ranks to really win something and really get it nailed down. I think kind of what we've been through tonight backs it up. I mean, I wanted to, because this is obviously one of my favourite eras being a Leeds fan. I want to defend it. I want it to be as glorious as what I remember in my mind, but it's just, you've got the facts staring you in the face about how good were this team actually. And they were probably achieved about what they should have done. I mean, would you argue, you know, top 5 finishers? I mean, I think the Premier League at that time, I don't remember there being a lot of teams filled with a lot of quality at that time. I know Chelsea were, you know, pre-Abramovich, even pre-Abramovich were a good squad.
Yeah.
You know, but we were certainly next on that list, I think. But yeah, we couldn't turn it into trophies, and it fell away badly. But yeah, has it changed your opinion of the 2002 team, Jace, or is it cemented what you kind of thought you knew already?
Going through it with that kind of detail for me just kind of backs up my kind of, I love that team, and I am similar to you. I want to say, it could have won the Premier League, but you know what? When you actually look at it, and I've got the league table up here now to the side of me of that year. So Arsenal won the division that season. Liverpool finished second. Manchester United finished third. Newcastle finished fourth, and that was the Bobby Robson team that had Lauren Robert. Shearer obviously up front, Nikos Dabizas, Shea Given,
Dyer there as well.
Kieran Dyer had been there, Jermaine Genius would have probably been there as well. Like they had some talent in that team, but they had Alan Shearer.
Yeah,
they had Alan Shearer, you know, a player with that kind of ability. And then you look at the 3 that finished above them, you know, Manchester United, Liverpool and Arsenal, they were full of elite talent, especially Arsenal then. That Arsenal team, you could try and go through that team 1 to 11 and put a Leeds player in there. You would probably put Ferdinand in alongside Sol Campbell, and you would maybe squeeze Kewell in there somewhere. But then you're still taking out Robert Pires, who, you know, I mean, that team was unbelievable. You know, your mates there saying about being 2 or 3 elite players short. That team had 9 or 10 elite players. You could argue that Loren, the right back, wasn't elite. Every other player was elite in that Arsenal team. They were so good. Gilberto Silva, Thierry Henry, Bergkamp, Pires. I don't know if Petit were there at the time. Ashley Cole, you know, David Seaman, Sol Campbell. They were just an unbelievable team. So for me, I think they achieved exactly what it should. If anything, I think it overachieved. That's my gut feeling on the truth of the matter, especially the season that we finished third and finished in the Champions League. But that season in particular is more interesting to talk about because of where we were halfway through the season. We were top of the league on the 1st of January after beating West Ham 3-0. And then we went 7 without a win. And we lost to all of them teams. We lost to all of them. If you have a look at it, we actually lost to Liverpool, Arsenal. We didn't beat any of them in that period of time. No. So,
like Alison says, I agree. We're all caught up in the emotion of these epic Champions League nights, and that's what it was as well. I mean, that the one time we've ever played in the Champions League in that format, you know, and it was a phenomenal run. But I mean, like you say, I mean, our 2001 was incredible.
Yeah,
you look at our record in 2001. We finished the previous year so strongly, including a Champions League semi-final, and then we were in first come the end of the year, and then it all went wrong. It all kind of imploded, and it's kind of a big what if moment for Leeds, really, because that started everything, didn't it? Really, the entire downfall of the club and all the talent we've missed out of down the years, all the homegrown players we've sold, and everything. I mean, for me, I would argue they underachieved because I think we should have at least won a domestic trophy or got to a final of a domestic trophy at least. Especially when you look at like Tottenham won a League Cup round then, Birmingham a few years later with Bowyer won a League Cup. It's like I would have loved to have lifted a trophy with that team. I would have absolutely loved it because I think that's what it needed, really. So I think on that front, I think we slightly underachieved. I think in the grand scheme of things, hand on heart, I think we weren't good enough to actually win a Premier League title or, certainly a European trophy, I don't think.
I think that's a fair point. I just don't think it should be understated how much of an achievement it is to finish third, fifth, Champions League semi-final, UEFA Cup at the time runs. It were back-to-back semi-finals, wasn't it, back then, if I remember? UEFA Cup and Champions League. So I think that is still some achievement. It's arguably as good as winning a League Cup in terms of difficulty. You know, so I hear you. So in one sense, it could be seen as an underachievement. My opinion, I think over the season to finish third and then fifth, some achievement for that squad when you actually think about what was in that squad. I mean, again, if I just have a quick look at the table of the teams that then finished below us, you had Chelsea that finished below us that season. And I remember that Chelsea. That Chelsea team was pre-Abramovich under Ranieri, right? Yeah. If I remember rightly. Yeah. But they still had Zola, Good Johnson, Gus Poyet, Dennis Wise were in that team. You know, they had some top players as well. Carlo Cudicini, I think, was their keeper back then. They had a good team. West Ham actually finished 7th that year, but quite a big gap to Chelsea and Leeds. So I think we're probably finishing around where we should have done.
Yeah. What could have been, eh? What could have been? What could have been? I hope everyone's enjoyed the debate show anyway. And if you have enjoyed it, please do smash a like on the video. And if you're watching this after the live, you're watching this a day after, whatever, get your comments in. What did you make of this 2002 team? And if there's any younger fans out there, it might be a nice little education for them going through a team of some absolute legends in that team, really. You know, Batty and Martin and Gary Kelly, guys like that. Phenomenal players.
Fantastic time it was, and a great team, and great to talk about it and just chat through them. My throat's not feeling too good right now, but certainly was a fantastic time to live through.
Do we ever get back there, Jace? Do we ever scale those heights again?
So tricky in football nowadays, isn't it? So tricky. I think we can. I don't know if we will in my lifetime. I'm not sure. I think we can. I think we've got the infrastructure, the fan base, the pull to do that. But I went to see Newcastle AC Milan last night, and even for them, I mean, they're finding it hard in the Premier League right now with all the money that they've got, the injuries that they've got, and you know they're riding that crest for so long. But even that, it's gonna drop. And last night they got second half, especially, they got completely outplayed, really. So it's a long way. It's nice to see them have it. I don't care how it comes to it because the football's full of it now for me. They're a fan base that, in my opinion, deserve it. But yeah, for Leeds, it's tough. But it can be done. Look at Villa. You know, things can change very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it goes our way in the future. Like I say, guys, please like the video, subscribe to the channel to catch future episodes of the debate as well. We'll be back again shortly. I've been Stephen Brown. With me has been Jason Baka. Jason, thank you very much for joining me, mate.
Thank you.
And we will see you again shortly. Thanks for watching.